Today, we're talking about color. One of the easiest ways to level up your art is to choose better colors. And I know it can feel overwhelming. You spend forever trying to get your colors to feel right. You tweak and adjust, shift things around, and yet it still looks off. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be a guessing game. Great color combos aren't magic. They're based on formulas, and in this video, I'm gonna break them all down. I'll share 3 color strategies you can start using today to make your drawings look instantly better. These are the same techniques pros use to create bold, cohesive palettes, and I promise they're not complicated, just smart. Take this illustration, for example. It just feels right. The colors don't compete, they flow. Everything fits together effortlessly. Now look at this other one. It's bold, energetic, and impossible to ignore. Totally different vibes, but both look balanced and strong. That's not an accident. It's the result of using one of the most well-known principles of color design, harmony and contrast. If you not use them, you basically can mess up your colors. Let's start with harmony first. This is when colors sit close together on the color wheel. They naturally feel like they belong. The result is a palette where colors seem to be connected naturally. This is what's called an analogous color scheme, and it's one of the easiest ways to make your colors feel intentional without overthinking them. Now, if we zoom in a little deeper, there's a variation worth knowing, something I think of as a subcategory of the analogous color scheme, the tone-on-tone palette. Tone-on-tone means you're working with the same hue, but shifting the value, making it lighter or darker. Same color, just in different intensities. This helps your palette feel unified. You can go bold with your color choices, but as long as your tones stay aligned, it will look like it all belongs. But what if you don't want things to blend in? Because sometimes, what you need isn't flow, it's contrast. And that's where contrast color schemes come in. On a color wheel, colors that sit directly across from each other are called complementary. Think blue and orange, red and green, purple and yellow. These combos don't play nice, they fight for attention. And that's exactly why they work. The contrast is sharp, so each color makes the other stand out even more. Now, in character design, you rarely use just 2 colors. So instead of sticking to direct opposite, a common approach is using what's called a split complement. You take one of the complementary colors and split it into its adjacent hues, combining complementary and analogous color schemes. So if you're working with purple and green as your base complements, you might split the purple into violet and magenta. That softens the clash, adds nuance, and gives you more control over the vibe of your palette. And here I have a bonus tip that will help bring your color schemes to pro level. It's a technique called separation. When you're working with multiple colors, it's easier for things to blend together or feel messy. A simple way to avoid that is by using a neutral or high contrast color to separate key elements. For example, in this character, I used white on the hands and small details. There's a reason for that. The palette here leans dark, so adding a bright color helps cleanly separate shapes and draw attention to the edges. It's a subtle trick, but it makes a huge difference in how readable and polished your colors feel. Now, harmony and contrast are powerful tools, and just using them will already level up your work. But if you want your colors to say something, you need to go deeper. You need to tap into emotion. Have you ever looked at a drawing and felt something immediately? Like it just clicked emotionally. That's often the power of color at work, because the right color choices can completely shift the mood of a piece, if you know how to use them. Take a look at this. These 5 characters all share the same line art, and yet each one gives off a totally different vibe. One looks serious, another feels very delicate. The colors are doing all the heavy lifting here, changing the mood without altering a single line. Same design, different feel. This is what emotional color design is all about, using color as a storytelling tool. And when you pick colors with intention, your drawings start to communicate more clearly. You can make your art feel passionate, calm, soft, or energetic just by adjusting the palette. If you ever struggled to convey the mood you had in your head, this will help. Now, here's where it gets a little more technical, but stay with me, this is the good stuff. The emotional effect of color isn't random. It's tied to 3 core properties: hue, saturation, and value. Let's break them down quickly, just so we know we're speaking the same language. Hue is the basic color family, like red, blue, green, etc. Saturation is how intense or muted that color is. A neon pink, super saturated. A dusty rose, low saturation. Value is how light or dark the color is. Think of it as how much black or white is mixed in. Pure white has high value and pure black is low value. And now that we've covered the basics, let's dive into the real stuff. Let's start with you. One of the first things to consider when designing with emotion in mind is whether you're leaning warm or cool. Warm colors like reds, oranges, and yellows tend to feel energetic, bold, or passionate, while cool colors like blues, purples, and teals usually feel calm, relaxed, or introspective. So if you're designing a bold, impulsive character, a bright saturated orange or yellow might be the perfect fit. On the flip side, if your character is thoughtful, introverted, or peaceful, these saturated blues will communicate that calmness perfectly. Another key player is saturation. The more saturated a color is, the more it jumps out. It catches your eye, and it brings loudness to the character. These saturated colors, though, they recede. They feel still, quiet, even a little sad. That's why you often see high saturation in action-heavy characters and low saturation in quieter, more melancholic designs. And then there's value. This affects how heavy or light a design feels. High-value colors tend to feel airy and delicate, but depending on saturation, they can create different moods. You can combine high-value tones with bright saturation for a sense of lightness and energy, or desaturated colors for something soft and ethereal. Low-value colors, on the other hand, feel heavier, smaller, and more serious. Dark, desaturated tones give weight and mood, while dark, highly saturated colors feel hard and solid. This is subtle stuff, but once you start playing with it, you can control the emotional weight of your art on a whole new level. You're not just picking colors that look good, you're choosing colors that feel right. Now, everything we've talked about so far, it's all foundational. But if you don't combine that knowledge with this next principle, the magic is lost. This is the things that ties it all together. Because even the most intentional color choices won't work if they're not balanced. So let's talk about how to calibrate colors for visual balance and make sure everything feels cohesive and polished. See, choosing the right colors isn't just about what shade you pick. It's also about how much space each color takes up and how they play off one another. That's where a few go-to formulas come in, little shortcuts to help you balance things out, no matter the vibe you're going for. Let's start with the basics. Every color in your design plays a different role, and depending on how much space that color takes up, we can divide them into dominant, subdominant, and accent. The dominant color covers the largest area. It's the base of your palette, the one that drives the overall feeling. The subdominant color shows up in smaller area, but it still has presence and helps connecting the dominant area with the accent points. The accent color is the smallest, but the most eye-catching. It's a spark. It creates focus, adds energy, and it gives your design that final pop. If you nail the relationship between these three, your color starts to feel right, even if they're loud or unexpected. Now, before we jump into the formulas, here's a quick tip that'll help tie everything together. Keep it in mind, and it'll make the next steps much easier to grasp. When you're building your color scheme, don't just judge based on you. Check your values too. Try looking at your palette in grayscale. If all of your colors have the same value, you're likely to lose readability, and your design will feel flat. But if each section has a distinct value, you'll have clear shapes, even without the line art. That's how you get solid visual structure. So when you pick colors, don't just think you, think value too. Alright, let's dive into the actual formulas now. Let's kick things off with a palette built around dark, desaturated dominant color. This kind of setup gives your design a grounded, moody vibe right from the start. For the subdominant color, you should stay in the same hue family, but shift in value, either lighter or darker, to create subtle contrast without breaking the mood. And for your accent, use highly saturated complementary color to bring energy and draw attention. Let me show you how that looks. I'm starting with a desaturated dark red for the dominant. Then I go almost black for the subdominant. Same hue family, deeper value. It keeps the mood consistent while adding visual depth. Finally, I hit it with a saturated green accent, a complementary color that cuts through the darkness and adds a spark of contrast. Now let's flip the setup. This time, the dominant color is light and desaturated, soft, airy, and subtle. To support that, your subdominant should stay close in value, but with a different hue. And that's key, because if you use colors that are too similar, like light blue and light green, they'll blend too much together and they'll be hard to read. Alternatively, you can create contrast with a dark, desaturated subdominant for a more dramatic split. Then for accents, since your main colors are light and soft, darker tones work best. Something like black can anchor the design and add visual weight. If your subdominant is already dark, go for something mid-value but punchy, ideally a complementary color, to keep it balanced. Here's how that looks in action. I'm starting with a soft baby blue as my dominant color. Then I bring in a pastel pink as the subdominant. Similar value, different hue. To keep separation clear, I'm using white as a neutral spacer. And for the accent, I've gone dark and muted, adding small logos across the outfit for contrast and clarity. This last one is all about impact. We're going bold and saturated with the dominant color. Now, for the subdominant, you've got two solid paths. You can play it safe with a desaturated neutral like black or white to help ground the palette, or go all in with another highly saturated adjacent hue. It's loud, it's chaotic, but sometimes that's exactly the energy you're going for. When it comes to accents, here's how to move. If your subdominant is neutral, use a complementary color as your accent, and make sure you're balancing value too. For example, if your dominant is bright, choose a dark complementary accent. If your subdominant is dark, flip it. Go with a bright complementary color instead. And if your subdominant is another saturated color, then the accent should do the opposite. Go achromatic. White, black, or gray can bring the balance back and keep things from going off the rails. Here's how I'm using it. I'm starting with a bold, saturated fuchsia for the dominant color. Then, I double down the loudness with a super saturated violet as the subdominant. To pull it all together, I finish with white. Crisp, clean, and the perfect contrast to all that color. Alright, now that we've covered it all, here's the last, and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. This is how you stack everything we've talked about. Start with the emotion. What kind of feeling are you trying to evoke? Then pick your palette based on harmony or contrast to match that emotion. And finally, balance the roles, dominant, subdominant, and accent, using value and saturation to guide the eye. When you combine emotion, intention, and structure, you're no longer just picking colors. You're designing with purpose. And that's when your colors start telling stories. That's it for this one. Hope it helped you see color in a new way. See you in the next one.